In this presentation, Conrad, Amy, and myself, Isaiah, we're going to be talking about the Anthem Blue Cross data breach. But before we going straight to the actual case, we're going to talk about what data breach is and phishing attack. So a data breach is an incident where data is stolen from a system without any sort of authorization or knowledge from the system owner. So there's a lot of ways data can be leaked. It can be from simply someone looking at the screen, taking pictures, or actually hackers attacking servers. The method they use for this particular attack was a phishing attack, which is a type of social engineering attack, which usually is used to steal login credentials and credit card numbers. And this works by sending emails. Usually emails can be text messages or any sort of messages containing a malicious link, which leads to a fake website in which the user tries to log in, and by logging in, writing down the login and password, he's actually sending this information to the attacker. So when the user does that, the hacker actually is gaining his credentials. He can now access whatever resource he was trying to log in. Okay, let's go to the actual attack. This attack happened on January 2015. That was the date, when Anthem actually discovered the breach. They announced that breach in next month, and after the investigation started and they were looking for what was the damage, the timing of the breach, they actually discovered that the initial breach was on February 2014. So the actual hackers had almost 1 year exploiting this attack. They were able to hide inside their systems for about a year before someone actually discovered they were inside the system, stealing information. So the method used, we talked about a little bit on the last screen, it was a phishing attack. So they actually, hackers send emails to workers on Anthem's subsidiaries, and according to the reports, about 5 users opened these emails containing this link, which downloaded malicious code inside their system, allowing remote access to their system. So at that point, the hackers gained access to their database. They were able to see their data, they stole all the information of the users. Also, by doing that, they gain escalation of privileges, meaning that they had more access than previously intended. So they were able to, well, access confidential and sensitive information. Some just one thing. The data that was stolen wasn't encrypted, so that some analysts said that was one of the reasons why the hackers were able to get a hold of all this data, because they didn't have to decrypt it or anything like that. Amy is gonna be talking to us now.
All right, some of the short-term consequences were there was an immediate exposure of information, full names, addresses, social security numbers, things like that. that was open for a short time. Another of the consequences was there was a lot of negative media coverage, which made a drop in company shares, and the fees and costs that were associated, the immediate fees and costs that were associated with this breach. The long-term consequences, identity theft, that could happen for many years, and it takes a long time to recover from identity theft. There's a loss of many hours spent with loss of wages and extra expenses to cover the cost of the damage to regain their identity, and sometimes that negative information never leaves their records. They might have an inability to get a loan, and there might be delays in healthcare if their medical ID was used. It could damage their for the company, it damages their reputation. There's many lawsuits and loss of business potential cost. Now, for the mitigation, Anthem, when they discovered the breach, they didn't wait for the required amount of time. They immediately enlisted a cybersecurity firm, and they began to educate the people. They made security improvements, password changes. They incorporated the two-factor authorization. They removed the compromised systems. They incorporated new ideas for administration, and then they provided identity theft protection for those involved in the breach. On to Conrad.
So ways that Anthem could have mitigated this attack from ever occurring in the first place is if they were to implement policy. And a good example of policy that they could have used is, let's say that they had the policy that they must verify with the IT staff any suspicious links that have been sent to them via email. If they were to, every time they would get some sort of link that they weren't sure of sent to them in their email, and they were verified by some professional of some sort in the field, this would be one step in providing some sort of mitigation in preventing them from clicking on this link, because they would know you probably shouldn't click on anything that's pretty unknown to them. There's other sorts of policies that could be set in place, but that's just one example of something that would work in this case. Educating their staff and members. So they did a lot of this at post-breach, but pre-breach, there's important things that they need to know, like social engineering should be a really important thing that any big company with lots of data should always be teaching their staff, and especially their members, where there's sensitive data that's involved, especially unencrypted sensitive data. We want to keep that as protected as possible, and we want people to know what can cause that stuff to be disclosed. For the staff to frequently change their passwords, this was not implemented before the breach, but it's really important for some sort of frequency involved with password changes. Maybe require your staff to change the password every 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, or something along those lines. And even further is the two-step authentication process for a password. They did implement this after the breach, but it's really important to not only require them to have a password, but to require some sort of code that will help them access their account that's sent to their email or sent to their phone or some other means, texted to them or something like that. Also assigning permission thoughtfully. So one big reason for the breach to ever occur was because Anthem just kind of gave out permission to different sorts of confidential data without actually thinking about who they're giving that permission to. So these people that were that fell for the malicious attack of phishing, clicked on the link, and then had their credentials released, they found that that basically all 5 of them didn't even need any of that confidential information. They were just given access to it. So then that gave the attackers access to it and caused the whole problem that occurred. Data encryption. So this is really important. All data should be encrypted, but as we've been reading throughout the semester. But data encryption in this case, if they would have even hashed or something with the data, the attackers would have had a heck of a time trying to decrypt that information and gain it. But without it being encrypted, they get access to the information, and everything's readily available in plain text for them to read. And that's why 80 million people's information was immediately released to them. And then finally, responding to suspicious activity. This is something else that they fell short of before the breach, where there was suspicious actions. People weren't able to log into their accounts, or they noticed something that happened on the system that they don't recall anybody doing or recall doing themselves. This stuff should have been reported, and if it was reported, it should have been acted upon. This would have caused the breach not to take an entire year for any attack to be recognized. Here's the references that we used. These are gives us the basic references of what the attack was about. There's one that's more in the future, in 2017, talks about everything that had happened with the attack, pre-attack, during the attack, and post-attack. And then there's some articles here that talk about what happened during the attack as the attack was happening live.